Well, Garland Nixon here, and I've got good news. Or is it good news? Reuters is joining forces with Twitter to save us from disinformation, right? Save us from disinformation. Isn't it nice to know that the people who brought you weapons of mass destruction and Russiagate and every other spy created lie in the world is now going to make the decision to turn over a new leaf and save us from disinformation. Let's talk. Howdy, hi there, friends and neighbors. That was an old Cheech and Chong bit. Howdy, hi there, friends and neighbors. Yes, we're going to talk about Twitter of all things. They're going to save us from misinformation. And so before I get into the story, let me just say this. That is the ruse these days. Those are the words. There are a couple of words: misinformation and disinformation, right? Now, first of all, what the hell does that mean anyway? Mis or disinformation. Information is information, right? Either something's true or it's false. If either you're giving me data, empirical data, information, or you're giving me your opinion, right? So if it's your opinion, it's your opinion. I can take it for true or false. I can take it with a grain of salt. If it's information, I can take it to be real. I can believe it. I can research it. But in my opinion, before we get into the story, the whole concept of misinformation and disinformation is an elitist concept. It is a concept that says, you, poor little peon, poor little member of the unwashed, the hoi polloi, you're not smart enough. You're not wise enough to curate the information yourself. You're not smart enough to take in information and determine what you want to believe and what you don't want to believe. You're not smart enough to take in information and then do your own research. Well, granted, some people aren't, but that's their business. Then they can believe absurdities. The fact of the matter is this. Let me give you an example. About the people who are saving us from misinformation and disinformation before we get into Twitter's latest censorship move. The year is 1991. The United States wants to go to war with Iraq. Iraq has invaded Kuwait, and that's a long story. We could get into that, but the bottom line is the public sentiment wasn't behind it. So what did the United States government do? They went and they got this public relations firm over on K Street, right near where I am. I got an office on K Street, near my office on K Street. They got a PR firm and they cooked up a scheme to deceive the American people with misinformation or disinformation or whatever they want to call it. I call it lies. They brought a young woman. She was Kuwaiti. They brought her before Congress. She cried and she said that the Iraqi soldiers were in the maternity ward and that they were taking newborn and premature babies right out of the incubators, throwing them on the floor and letting them die. That played out in front of Congress. It was all over the news in America. It was on the in the evening news. It was everywhere, and people believed it. Everybody believed it, and the numbers went up. The support for going to war with Iraq in 1991 went up, and ultimately, when the U.S. went to war with Iraq, then President George Bush, Herbert Walker Bush Sr., so that was George Bush Sr., came out of that war with a 90% approval rating. But just like his son would do 12 years later, he started a war based on a lie. He deliberately deceived the American people. Now, they use words like misinformation, they use words like disinformation. It was a lie. That's all it was, a lie. So now we get words like misinformation and disinformation, and the Washington Post and the New York Times and Reuters and all the rest of them were down with that. So here's my story. Let's start to go with our story. You will be happy to know, if I can ever get our story up, you will be happy to know that, whoa, Twitter partners with UK government-backed CIA-linked Reuters to censor alternative views, right? Twitter is collaborating with Reuters, a CIA-linked media outlet that also participates in covert UK information warfare program to censor misinformation and on social media. So what they're going to do is they're going to work with Reuters and the Associated Press to censor misinformation while actively promoting news stories that they deem credible. Don't you just love that? Don't you just love that? So now we have the people who brought us weapons of mass destruction, they brought us Russiagate, they brought us lie after lie after lie, and now they're going to help Twitter censor misinformation, and they're going to help give us true information and news stories that are true. Might I remind you that just before the election, Twitter literally censored a news story that was provably true and accurate. You've probably heard about the infamous Hunter Biden story, Hunter Biden in Ukraine. How do I know that was accurate? Because I reported on it well over a year before that, probably 1 to 2 years prior to this story and the hard drive story hitting the news. I had reported on that extensively, the whole story. And then when it came out and hit the news, social media all said, no, this is false information. It's Russian lies. It's blah, blah, blah. They deliberately misinformed the public. And then afterwards, they had to pull back and say, okay, well, yes, I guess it is true. But they did that to deliberately interfere with the election. All right, so let's move on. So here's the thing about Reuters. Let's start here. So Reuters has a bit of a history. Let's look into Reuters history. So now Twitter's going to have Reuters, understand this. They're going to censor out misinformation while, as they say, actively promoting news stories that they deem credible, right? Let's look here. This would be an interesting story. Britain secretly funded Reuters in 1960s and 1970s. The British government secretly funded Reuters in the 60s and 70s at the behest of an anti-Soviet propaganda unit linked to British intelligence, and concealed the funding by using the BBC to make the payments, declassified government documents show. The money was used to expand Reuters coverage of the Middle East and Latin America, and hidden by increased news subscription payments to Reuters BBC. We are now in a position to conclude an agreement providing discrete government support for Reuters services in the Middle East and Latin America, according to a 1969 British government document marked secret and entitled Funding of Reuters by HMG, right? The document illustrates the level of involvement the government once had in Reuters' affair and the explicit agreement to conceal the financing. Many news organizations received, some form of state subsidy after World War II, a spokesman for Reuters said. But the arrangement in 1969 was not in keeping with our trust principles, and we would not do that today. Okay, so what do we find? That during the Cold War, the UK government was funding Reuters for propaganda against Russia. Okay? This was propaganda. Now, here's the thing. Who was that propaganda aimed at? It was aimed at the British people. It was aimed at the American people. It was aimed at people in the West who read Reuters. It wasn't aimed at the Russians. So it was anti-Soviet propaganda that was aimed at the Western people. They were lying to us. The British government paid Reuters to lie to the British people. Now, what's interesting about that is when you go down to that story, and a spokesman for Reuters says, the arrangement was not in keeping with our trust principles, and we would not do that today. Okay, so well, that's great. Reuters is like, hey, man, that was during the Cold War. That was wrong. There's no way. I'm sorry about that, dude. Yeah, we were government propaganda artists. But of course, that was back then. That was in the old days. We'd never do that now. They would never do that now, would they? Well, let's look at a gray zone report. Dated February 20th, 2021. Reuters, BBC, and Bellingcat participated in covert UK foreign office-funded programs to weaken Russia, leaked docs reveal. New leaked documents show Reuters and the BBC's involvement in covert UK programs to effect attitudinal change and weaken the Russian state's influence. We've got here the leaked media materials show that Thomson Reuters Foundation and BBC Media Action participating in a covert information warfare campaign aimed at countering Russia, working through a shadowy department of the UK Foreign Office known as the Counter Disinformation and Media Development. The media organization operated alongside a collection of intelligence contractors in a secret entity known as the Consortium, right? So let's go back here. In the 1960s, Reuters was providing propaganda as and being paid for it by the federal government, by the British government. And what they said was, yeah, we did that in 69. It was not in keeping with our trust principles. We wouldn't do it today. That was the spokesman for Reuters. And now what do they find out? They're doing it today. They're doing it today. Well, all you had to do was pay attention to Russiagate and see week after week after week of the walls are closing in. Trump's going down now. Mueller's going to get him week after week after week to know that it was a propaganda operation. But the bottom line is it was a propaganda operation and it still is a propaganda operation. So we've got here Reuters' shady activities don't stop there. A top former official who was tasked with the responsibility of advancing Thomas Reuters' ability to meet the disparate needs of the U.S. government Global Business Director Sean Scaly had previously served as a CIA agent for at least 33 years. So Reuters' Government Global Business Director, Don Salishi, was a 33-year veteran of the CIA. That's Reuters. Now let's go on. AP, the Associated Press. Well, they're involved in it. Can't we trust the AP? Come on, get out of here. The AP is also close to Western governments, boasting a long history of echoing their dubious talking points. The Newswire published numerous articles in the lead up to the U.S. invasion of Iraq, falsely claiming that leader Saddam Hussein had weapons of mass destruction. A decade before, it similarly ran fake news on supposed Kuwaiti babies being removed from incubators by Iraqi soldiers. This May, AP fired its reporter Emily Wild over her tweets criticizing Israel and her past student activism in support of Palestinian rights. They're literally firing reporters for tweeting criticizing Israel and for tweeting in favor of Palestinian rights. That's Reuters. That's who now Twitter has decided they're going to bring them in to help them with misinformation and disinformation. I found, interestingly enough, that term misinformation and disinformation is a term used by the people who spend most of their time giving us misinformation and disinformation, who simply lie to us constantly. I have Apocalypse. Oh, there we go. Apocalypso says, Tony Blair was behind the WMDs and Iraq false flag. Yeah, you can look up something called the Downing Street memos. Look up the Downing Street memos, and you'll find that they basically lied, that they knew that the Iraq war was a casus belli. You know, they knew it was going to happen. They knew it was a done deal. And they lied to people saying, we're still trying to find out whether or not he has false weapons of mass destruction. They knew that the information was being built around the plan. You know, so not that their plan was being built around the data and the information. So it was all a lie. It was all a fraud. But the bottom line is this: if you're awoke by now, if you have awakened, you know, the woke people kill me, and we ain't one of those kind of woke people. But if you're the kind of woke person that doesn't trust the government, you already know that every one of those wars, every one of these military actions, it's always built on a pack of lies. Because if they told Americans the truth, if they told the British people the truth, they would not get any support for it if they said the truth. So now what's happening? What's happening is this: they have the people like me and you who question the system, people like you and I who we don't deal with this misinformation, disinformation stuff. What we do is this: if somebody says something, we research it as best we can. We don't claim to be. We're citizen journalists. Okay, I get paid. I'm not necessarily a citizen journalist. I'm a journalist. But before that, that wasn't always paid. And I started off being a news junkie and doing my own research and studying philosophy. I studied philosophy for many, many years because what I wanted to learn was how to get to the root of issues. I didn't want to get caught up. I didn't want to get caught up and say, I am a member of this particular group. Therefore, who are members of my group all believe a certain thing. I'm a Democrat, or I'm a libertarian, or I'm a socialist, or I'm a whatever, fill in the blank, or I'm a Republican, or I'm a whatever label you want to put on me, right? That I chose some label, and as a result of that label, that colored how I viewed the world. No, I'm not any of those things. I'm independent. I'm an independent thinker, and therefore I try to figure things out based on the information that I can get in. And might I add, based on history. History is very important, and getting around my own biases. I always say this. I try to pretend that I am an alien who was dropped onto this earth, and that's how I figure things out. I'm not an American. I'm not a Westerner. I'm not a black person. I'm not a man. I'm not a woman. I'm not anything. I am an alien dropped on this planet, and I am taking the data that I bring in, and I'm trying to figure it out. That way, I'm not looking through the lens of a particular group. If you are a libertarian, if you are a socialist, if you are a capitalist, if you are a Republican, if you are a Democrat, if you are a fill in the blank, right? Then your view is going to be colored by that lens that you're looking through. I was going back and forth with a guy on Facebook, and he was obviously a Democrat. And he's like, hey, Doc, did you see Fauci and Rand Paul? And I'm like, yeah. What'd you think? I said, I thought Rand Paul was right. Rand Paul, I hate Rand Paul. And Fauci, he was obviously, because he's a member of that particular group. If you're a member of that group, Fauci's the good guy, Rand Paul's the bad guy. So you have to believe whatever Fauci says. Now, if you're a Republican, conservative, libertarian, Rand Paul's the good guy and Fauci's the bad guy. So you have to believe what Rand Paul said, not Fauci, because you're basing your interpretation of reality based on who said something, not what they said. And I said, I could hate them both. I could love them both. I've got to examine what was said. And when I examined what was said, Rand Paul basically said, look, here's the definition of gain of function. You said that you were not subsidizing gain of function research, and gain of function definition fits what you were researching. Therefore, you lied. And Fauci ducked and dodged. But when you look at what happened, and if you examine Fauci's earlier testimony, Rand Paul was right. I ain't a libertarian. I'm a lefty. I'm a hardcore lefty. Believe you me, I'm a hardcore lefty. But that didn't have anything to do with it. Rand Paul was right. As an alien who was dropped on this planet to interpret what happened, I interpret what was said, not who said it. Rand Paul was right, and Fauci either lied. I'll put it like this. Here's what I can say. Dr. Fauci made contradictory, inconsistent statements. Lie, the term lie implies that he knew he was telling a falsehood when he told it, and there was intentional. I'm not getting into that. Maybe so, may very well be so, but I'm not getting into it. All I can say for sure is Fauci made inconsistent, contradictory statements. One couldn't interpret that as a lie. He could argue, I didn't know, whatever, but I can tell you this, Rand Paul was correct in his assertion that Fauci's statement was contradictory and inconsistent. That's all I know about the circumstance. I could get, but the other guy was like, yeah, well, I'd take what Fauci said over Rand Paul any day. Well, I wouldn't. I wouldn't take what anybody said. I wouldn't take what my best friend said over my worst enemy. I would look at what they said and see what the evidence was that supported the veracity of their statement. Nothing more, nothing less. As many of you may know, when I retired from law enforcement, I was a major. I was the commander of the investigations division, and that's the way I did an investigation. I have the target of investigation. I have data. I have information, and I evaluate the veracity of the statements that people made. If I can't figure out, I look at their history. Maybe I can use other factors. The bottom line was I looked at that and I came up with Fauci appears to be lying, but I'm not going to use the word lying. I'm going to say contradictory. I'm going to say inconsistent. And if people can take it from there. Now, Why do I get into all of that? Because Twitter now and Facebook are saying they're censoring misinformation or disinformation. Here's what's slick about that. Those terms are unclear and amorphous, so they can mean anything they want them to mean. But in the modern day era, in an era where we have a government in the United States, in the UK similar, who wants to control information, who wants to tell lies, who wants you to believe their lies, and who wants to shut down people who tell the truth if it is not in keeping with the narrative that they want to work, right? Then misinformation and disinformation from a Twitter or other social media company that really is nothing more but an outreach, but a public relations machine for the intelligence community, a public relations machine for the big corporations. To them, all this information means is something I want to shut down because it doesn't work with what I'm trying to do. I want to attack a country. We want to start a war, or there's a country we don't like: Cuba, Iran, Venezuela, Russia, China. The boogeymen that they put forward. There's probably people on this stream right now watching that are bite the hook on some of the boogeymen that are like that. There's people probably on this stream right now. Oh yeah, China really is evil. Venezuela, Cuba, yeah, they're buying into the CIA. Love people like you. I don't buy any of it. When the intelligence community tells me that a particular country is my enemy, I say to myself, well, I know that country ain't my enemy. When the government starts saying to me, yes, you better hate country X, I know, whatever you do, don't hate country X, because they ain't wrong. Because history tells us that when the government wants to overthrow any country, they start off by vilifying the country. And let's not forget, here's the magic word: the leader of that country is what? A dictator. I don't care if the leader of that country was won in a democracy and got 99.9% of the votes. If they got some oil or some lithium or some cobalt that the United States wants, that person is an evil dictator, and they need some good old freedom, love, and liberty to go in and mine that lithium and that cobalt and pump that oil out for them. That's what it really is. But the suckers here in the United States, they're going to feed the suckers all the bait. Hey, the so-and-so's an evil dictator. Why? He's a communist. He's a fill in the blank. Now, let's not forget our friends in Bahrain, in the UAE, in Saudi Arabia. Is there a more oppressive? Is there a more dictatorial? Is there a worse government in the United States? In the world than Saudi Arabia? No, but they are part of the U.S. empire. So instead, we have our selective indignation. Oh no, something happened in Russia or China or Cuba. Oh my God! And then meanwhile, Saudi Arabia like has a mass trial and chops the heads off of 30 people. It's radio silence. You don't see anything. Mohammed bin Salman comes to the U.S. and like he spends $1 billion or something on a public relations tour, and he goes to Hollywood, and they're like, "Come on, the Late Show. Look at who it's Mohammed bin Salman, and he's got his bone saw with him. Hey, and now our band, Mohammed and the Bone Saw 5, right? They're happy, they love him, wonderful. It's all a game. I don't buy into the game. So therefore, when Twitter says they're doing misinformation, they're censoring, they're stopping misinformation. The misinformation would be, hey, that guy over there saw some poor Jamal Khashoggi up with a bone saw. That's the misinformation. The news story that's valid is the one that says, hey, that Mohammed bin Salman sure is a stand-up kind of guy. He's making changes in Saudi Arabia now. Women can drive now. Really? Women can drive. Oh my God. Well, he's a far lefty liberal guy. I guess he'll have a rainbow flag wrapped around him next. It's all selective indignation, and it's all a fraud. And so right now, the fact is this: when people look at this, when people look at this story right here, and this story says, this story, Twitter partners with UK government-backed CIA-linked Reuters to censor alternative views. I say, make sure you go to this one that says, Britain secretly funded Reuters in the 1960s and 1970s. And then you go to this one that says, Reuters, BBC, and Bellingcat participated in covert UK office-funded programs. These are the people that are going to bring you the truth. These are the people that are going to save you from disinformation. You know what? If these people were going to save me, and by the way, might I add, some of the disinformation that they're going to save you from? Me. They're going to save you from people like me who are just, I don't have the answers for you. I got no answers for you. But here's what I say: ask the questions. That's all I say. It's funny because I do my show on every Friday, WPFW 89.3 FM in Washington D.C. from 6 to 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. This Friday, Dennis Kucinich is going to come on. I'm going to have him for about a half hour. We're going to talk. But at any rate, so he was drummed out of office, believe it or not. The Democrats drummed him out of office because he pushed back against the system. Unacceptable. But my point being that what I simply do is I raise questions. I look at history. History is very important to understand things. Right? You will find that the neoliberals, the neoconservatives, they're all about today. They don't want you to think about history. They don't want you to take history into account. What they want to do is come up with a premise, a narrative, a false premise, a false narrative, feed that false premise and false narrative to you, and then have you believe that false premise and false narrative. And they don't want you to look at history and you say, well, let me give you an example. Reuters, Crimea. Oh, well, Putin took Crimea in 2014. No, they don't want to tell you there's a lot more to it than that. It ain't just that. That sounds great. Yeah, Putin invaded Crimea in 2014. I can do a show on that. That ain't exactly the case. I'll put it like this. The Russians started building their Black Sea naval base in Crimea in 1781 or 1783 under Catherine the Great. That's when they have a Black Sea Navy base in Crimea that was built around the time of the American Revolution. Okay. So let's not pretend that the people in Crimea speak Russian. They had a referendum to go to Russia. I mean, but again, that would be misinformation. If I were to tell you that would be disinformation. It's fact, it's history. When you understand that history, you start to understand how the hell did they invade the Crimea when they had an army base there, and a significant number of people who were in the town of Sevastopol, where the base is, worked at the base. It's like I'm in Anne Arundel County. You know what the number one employer in this county is? NSA, the National Security Counter, like 25,000 employees. That'd be like saying, yeah, the NSA invaded Anne Arundel County. Invaded most of the people, not most of the people, a lot of people in this county work there. They're the number one employer in this county, okay? But at any rate, so just be wary when you hear misinformation, disinformation. It means nothing. Question it. Whatever information you get, even if especially it's from me, not even if it's, especially if it's from me, look into it, question it. Don't allow your biases. Also, the fact that you are a fill in the blank, don't allow that to put you in a position where you only believe people who are in your tribe, and then anything that people that aren't in your tribe say, you automatically discount it. Take the information separate from the tribe and evaluate the information based on what you can find to support it. That's the way I do things. So here's what's important. I need some more followers on Twitter. So if you're watching, on Twitter, but mostly on YouTube, I need more people. So if I could ask you to go to my YouTube channel, if you're watching it on Facebook, if you're watching this on Twitter, go to my YouTube channel, subscribe, hit the like button, hit the little bell so that you'll get notifications, and share all of my videos. If you can, share my videos on all of your social media platforms. My name's Garland Nixon, at Garland Nixon on Twitter, Garland.Nixon on Instagram, just plain old Garland Nixon on Facebook. And you can always email me, GarlandN. That's my first name and the first letter of my last name, garlandn@gmail.com. Now, I may not be on tomorrow night. I hope to, but the Washington football team's playing. And if you know anything about Garland, I love my Washington football team. So the football team is on having a preseason game. And so I'm going to enjoy that. I do love sports. I like the Washington teams, Washington football team, the Washington Nationals, the Washington Wizards, the Caps. I like all of that stuff. And I'm proud of it. I love it. You got to enjoy things in life. I am getting back from the injury. My back's still not the best. My foot's still swollen and discolored. My head's still bobbling around a little bit from my concussion, but I'm able to put two and two together enough to do a enough to occasionally do a YouTube. I'm bad. I was, like I said, I was that I was the accident and everything going on. I wasn't able to be on YouTube much, but I'm going to try to be on as much as I can. All right. Thanks a lot. Peace. Somebody's got, that's kind of wild. The racist NFL. Let me tell you something about Garland Nixon. If I like it and I have fun, I'm gonna watch it. I'm not one of these kind of people that, like, the NFL will do something and I'll be like, hey, they did some social thing, therefore they don't have rainbow flags, so I ain't watching it. Or, oh, they've got rainbow flags, I'm not watching. Look, I like football, I like basketball, I like soccer, I like a lot of sports. I'm gonna watch them. I'm not gonna get into the background, who's who. Yeah, let me tell you something. I literally, I watched the football game. I'll end up with this, but it's important, of how sheepish people have got. One of the viruses that people are suffering from now is the stinking sheeple virus, right? So I watched the Washington football team versus Tampa Bay in the playoffs. And this guy, Taylor Heineke's out there. Nobody ever heard of him. It was one of these hero things. Nobody ever heard of this kid. 6 months early, he was, he wasn't even in he wasn't even on the roster. He was working somewhere, going to school. Okay. So it's a feel good story. And he plays a really, really good game. And I'm like, hey, Taylor Heineke, good game. I love Taylor Heineke. I hope he's on the team next year. And then I heard somebody literally say this, well, he's a Trump supporter. And I'm like, get out of here with that. I don't like, I'll put it like this. I'm not going to watch a movie and I'm like, hey, that's a great movie. Let me look into the background of the star of the movie and make sure that he has the proper political positions and the proper social positions before I enjoy them. No, I like aliens and ray guns, machine guns, explosions, attacks from outer space, all that kind of that. Man, I like that kind of, yeah, my favorite movies. If Schwarzenegger's in there firing a fully automatic weapon, I'm probably going to like that movie. That's the kind of stuff I like, right? Okay, the action kind of things, and the Predator, one of my favorites. But the Predator, get to the chopper. That's kind of my movie. If there's some idiot with like an IQ of 3 that can bench like 600 pounds yelling, get to the chopper, that's a Garland Nixon kind of movie. I'm sorry. I may read a lot and try to do the intellectual stuff, but when I'm enjoying a movie, I want to hear, get to the chopper. How about that? So all this crap about this person is the right, this football player or athlete or sports franchise or actor is doing or not doing the right thing in their personal life. They could be a hatchet murderer if they can throw a touchdown. Okay. If you can throw a touchdown for my favorite team, I'll turn my head. Let's just say, okay, you may be a hatchet murderer, but just keep it, don't let me see it. Don't let me see the hatchet murderer. Throw those touchdowns, and I'll be doing like my end zone dances. Yay! Let's re-sign the hatchet murderer. Let's give him a long-term contract. We got to keep this guy. We got games to win. Sorry, that's just me. That's who I am, and I'm proud of it. At any rate, thanks a lot, everybody, for coming on. I will be on regular. And my main man, John Kiriakou, John Kiriakou, he's going to be back soon. And John and I are going to be doing some shows together. I'm looking forward to that. John Kiriakou is a good guy. We're going to have guests and all kinds of stuff. But I'll be on regular now that I can drag my limp body around enough to sit in the chair. I will be back on regularly. So keep an eye out and follow me and all that kinds of good stuff. And thanks a lot. Oh, let's see what a couple people have to say, since I've been on 33 minutes. Same here. If you ever watch Jimmy Dore, he's also has broken down Fauci's statements over time and shredded him right out of the gate. He lied about wearing masks. But look, bottom line, I don't have no heroes. Fauci's not my hero. Rand Paul, Trump, Biden. To be honest, I hate them all. For the most part, I don't like any of them. So that's the one good thing I have. Since I don't like any of them, it makes it easy for me. I don't have to find the one that I like or find the one that I hate. I don't like them all. It's like party politics. People are like, oh, the Democrats are right. No, the Republicans. I'm like, they're the same party. They're both a neoliberal party. They're going to give everything to the corporations. Did you look at the Donald Trump tax cuts? You think Donald Trump is some kind of a guy in favor of the little guy? He gave what's turning out to be a $6 trillion tax cut for the corporations and the top 1%. And here's why. They said it was $1.5 trillion, right? But the reason they said the Trump tax cuts were $1.5 trillion was because they predicted that his tax cuts would create 3.5% economic growth over the next 10 years, which would offset the tax cuts, and it would only be $1.5 trillion. Problem is, a year and a half later, we flew into the worst depression/recession since 1929. And we ain't getting no 3.5%, which means now the Trump tax cuts are going to be about $6 trillion. 5 to 6 trillion going to the top 0.1%. That's what the blue class billionaire Donald Trump did. And you know what? Here comes Joe Biden and the Democrats talking about, yeah, Trump tax cuts are terrible. They're horrible. Why? We got to stop them. And you know what they're not getting rid of? The Trump tax cuts. Biden, look at his infrastructure plan, look at his $3.5 trillion budget, look at all of that. And what you will not find going away, what you will not find leaving is the Trump tax cuts, because they would talk crap about the Trump tax cuts, but they're owned by the exact same people as Donald Trump and the Republicans. They're all owned by the billionaires. They may be owned by different factions of the top 1%, but they're owned by the top 1%. One may be owned by Soros, the other may be owned by the Koch brothers, the other may be owned by Singer, the other, they're going to be over. One's owned by Wall Street, the other's owned by Silicon Valley, the other owned by international, wood and mining, but they're all owned. And the battles that you see are not battles between two different partisan groups, different parties. The battles that you see are battles between various factions of the elite ruling class. Ain't none of them on your side. And if you think so, you're suffering from the sheeple virus, the sheeple variant. Okay, that's what you're suffering from if you think one of those groups is on your side. But at any rate, you know who is on your side? I'm on your side. So thanks a lot. Sean McCoy says, as a matter of fact, they're going to put back the salt tax. Robert Kovac says, peace, Carlin, and everyone. J-Mo says, an institution that is racist. What about that? Do that mental gymnastics. Love it. Yeah, whatever. I'm in America. So what? Look, I'm going to tell you what I'm going to do. I enjoy football, and I'm going to watch football. I'm going to watch what I like, and I ain't doing a background check on none of the football players or anybody else or the teams, or I don't care who's kneeling, who ain't kneeling. I want to see somebody catch a touchdown. That's what I'm trying to enjoy for that period of time that I'm watching the game. Guess what? Here's the reality. I'm getting away from that. For the period of time I'm watching the game, that's my team with my colors and my uniform. I like that. I'm getting away from all of those discussions about who's right, who's wrong, who's good, who's bad. Forget that. I want to see somebody catch a touchdown. That's what I'm trying to see. Somebody sack the quarterback. Somebody make a good hit on somebody. That's what I'm trying to see right there. Some good coverage. That's what I'm seeing. All right. Well, thanks a lot. Garland.Nixon on Instagram. Garland Nixon on Facebook. GarlandN@gmail.com. Garland Nixon on Twitter. Subscribe. Hit the like button. Hit the little bell so that you can get notified. And share on your social media platforms. I'll be back soon. Thanks. I am